Here.
Brancatelli.
Here.
I got Cleveland.
I'm here.
Conwell. Griffin.
Here.
Hairston.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Bashir Jones.
Here.
Joe Jones. Casey.
Present.
McCormack. Mooney.
Here.
Valencic.
Present.
Santana. Slight.
Present.
Zone.
Present.
You have a quorum, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. At this point, I would ask everybody to pause for a moment of silence, and then that'll be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. There's certainly plenty to think about in our moment of silence. A number of people that have been sick, died, lost their jobs, especially those that have passed away and had to be alone. So if we could take a moment of silence, then we'll have Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. We'll do Pledge of Allegiance. Let me see if we get the flag. There you go. I pledge allegiance
Allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America,
To the republic
for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
for God,
indivisible.
indivisible, with liberty.
liberty, justice for all.
Okay, thank you all very much. Need to run through, need to dispense with some legal formalities. So this council meeting is being held during the COVID-19 emergency declaration and is being conducted as a virtual meeting in accordance with Ohio's open meeting laws as amended by Sub House Bill 197. Notice was publicly posted. In compliance with the Charter and Rules of Council, a copy of all legislation to be heard during this council meeting was furnished previous to the meeting to every council member through their council email. It is hereby acknowledged without objection that all members of council received this legislation. It is hereby declared without objection that Council Rule 49 requiring attendance of the mayor, director of all departments at council meetings is waived for this and other virtual council meetings held under amended Sub House Bill 197. Madam Clerk, please dispense with the journal.
By Councilmember Bishop, that the reading of the minutes of the last meeting be dispensed with the journal approved, seconded by Councilmember Mooney.
Thank you. Before we go to communications, this council meeting is going to be, there's a lot of legislation that needs to be introduced before we can pass it. There's a lot of things that had to be heard. We will be passing some things that have gone through committee hearing, but if you would kind of block out a week from today, Wednesday the 3rd, for a subsequent council meeting, committee of the whole and council meeting, so we can get caught up or get closer to caught up with the legislation that is needed. With that, Madam Clerk, communications.
File number 388-2020, the Department of Public Works accepted a $5,000 grant from Dick's Sporting Goods without restrictions. It will be used to support recreational programming. File number 589-2020, new application for C1 license, Family Dollar Stores of Ohio, 16605 South Miles Road, Ward 1. File number 390-2020, new application for C1 license, Family Dollar Stores at East 93rd Street, 3470 East 93rd Street, Ward 6. File number 391-2020, new application for C1 license at 1250 East 105th Street, Ward 9. File number 392-2020, the Department of Public Safety accepted a gift of hand sanitizer, gloves, and masks for police and EMS COVID-19 response from Tito's Handmade Vodka valued at $10,000. File number 393-2020, the Department of Public Safety accepted a gift of services to sterilize 100 frontline zone cars for police for COVID-19 response from Mr. Enzo Madalena, valued at $10,000. File number 394, 2020. The Department of Public Safety accepted a gift of used gun vault from Cuyahoga Heights Police Department for Cleveland Police Shooting Range valued at $500.
Thank you. We will now move to first reading, emergency ordinances to be referred for administrative and committee review.
Ordinance 396, 2020 by Councilmember McCormack, an emergency ordinance to amend Section 4 of Ordinance 464, 2019 in order to repeal a sunset expiration of Sections 401.152, 153, 231, 473.10, Chapter 517, Shared Mobility Device and Bicycle Vendors, Sections 517.01 through 08, and amended Sections 473.01 through 03, 05, 07, and through 47, 473.09, 431.03, and 431.15, regulating the vendors and use of shared mobility devices, and amending Section 473.02 of the codified ordinances regarding the speed limit while operating an e-scooter. Ordinance 397, 2020 by Councilmember Kelly by departmental request, an emergency ordinance authorizing the issuance and sale of bonds in the maximum principal amount of $15,300,000 for the purpose of providing funds to improve buildings and structures, housing, and providing for the discharge of governmental functions and services otherwise benefiting the public safety, health, and welfare, and for the provision of necessary fixtures, furnishings, equipment, technology, appurtenances, utilities, and site improvements for the purpose of authorizing related matters. Ordinance 398, 2020 by Councilmember Kelly by departmental request, an emergency ordinance authorizing the issuance and sale of bonds in the maximum principal amount of $2 million for housing and neighborhood development and authorizing related matters. Ordinance 399, 2020 by Councilmember Kelly by departmental request, an emergency ordinance authorizing the issuance and sale of bonds in the maximum principal amount of $23,250,000 for the purpose of providing funds to improve municipal parks and recreation facilities and authorizing related matters. Ordinance 400, 2020 by Councilmember Kelly by departmental request, an emergency ordinance authorizing the issuance and sale of bonds in the maximum principal amount of $23,500,000 for the purpose of providing funds to improve the municipal street system and related facilities and authorize related matters. Ordinance 401, 2020 by Councilmember Kelly by departmental request, an emergency ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of revenue bonds in a principal amount not to exceed $2.5 million to provide funds for economic and community development in the city and authorizing related matters.
First reading, emergency ordinances to be passed.
Ordinance 395, 2020 by Councilmember Zone, an emergency ordinance authorizing Director of Department of Public Works to enter into agreement with Musical Arts Association, DBA, the Cleveland Orchestra for Gordon Square Neighborhood Partners Music Program through the use of Ward 15 casino revenue funds. Ordinance 409, 2020 by Councilmembers Bishop, McCormack, Johnson, Cleveland, Griffin, Bashir Jones, Valencia, Conwell, Brancatelli, Kelly, Santana, Zone, Casey, Slight, an emergency ordinance amending Section 1 of Ordinance 201-2020 as it pertains to authorizing the Director of Department of Community Development to enter into an agreement with Broadway School of Music and Arts for the Community Arts Instruction and Enrichment Program through the use of wards 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17 casino revenue funds. Ordinance 410, 2020 by Council Members Joe Jones, Bishop, Johnson, Cleveland, and Griffin, an emergency ordinance amending the titles and sections 1 and 2 of Ordinance 824, 2019 as it pertains to authorizing the Director of Department of Community Development to enter into an agreement with Union Miles Development Corporation for the Family Unity in the Park Community Health Expo and Education Fair through the use of wards 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6 casino revenue funds. Ordinance 411-2020 by Councilmember Griffin, an emergency ordinance amending Section 2 of Ordinance 1007-2019 as it pertains to authorizing Director of Department of Aging to enter into agreement with University Circle, Inc. for the University Circle Interactive Cleveland Program through the use of Ward 6 casino revenue funds. Ordinance 412-2020 by Councilmember Polensek, an emergency ordinance authorizing Director of Department of Economic Development to enter into agreement with BBDB Properties LLC for the storefront improvement project through the use of Ward 8 casino revenue funds. Ordinance 413-2020 by Council Members McCormack, Bashir Jones, and Kelly, an emergency ordinance authorizing the Director of Department of Community Development to enter into agreement with the Cleveland Restoration Society for the Heritage Home Program through the use of Wards 3, 7, and 13 casino revenue funds. Ordinance 414-2020 by Councilmember Bashir Jones, an emergency ordinance authorizing Director of Department of Aging to enter into an agreement with Famigos Foundation for the Emergency Food Card Program through the use of Ward 7 casino revenue funds. Ordinance 415-2020 by Councilmembers Joe Jones and Bashir Jones, an emergency ordinance authorizing Director of Department of Aging to enter into an agreement with Famigos Foundation for the Senior Lawn Care Program through the use of Wards 1 and 7 casino revenue funds. Ordinance 416-2020 by Councilmember McCormack, an emergency ordinance authorizing Director of Department of Community Development to enter into an agreement with Organize Ohio for the Historical Heisman Marker Project through the use of Ward 3 casino revenue funds. Ordinance 417-2020 by Council Members Bishop and Johnson, an emergency ordinance authorizing Director of Department of Aging to enter into an agreement with Mount Pleasant Now Development Corporation for the Senior Lawn Care Program through the use of Wards 2 and 4 casino revenue funds. Ordinance 418-2020 by Councilmember Brancatelli, an emergency ordinance authorizing the Director of Department of Economic Development to enter into an agreement with Slavic Village Development for the Slavic Village Economic Assistance and Beautification Project through the use of Ward 12 casino revenue funds. Ordinance 419-2020 by Councilmember Polensek, an emergency ordinance authorizing Director of Department of Community Development to enter into agreement with Greater Collinwood Development Corporation for the Code Enforcement and Nuisance Abatement Prevention Program through the use of Ward 8 casino revenue funds. Ordinance 420-2020 by Councilmember Mooney, an emergency ordinance authorizing Director of Department of Community Development to enter into an agreement with Westtown Community Development Corporation for the Westtown CDC Code Enforcement Program through the use of Ward 11 casino revenue funds. Ordinance 421-2020 by Councilmember Polensek, an emergency ordinance authorizing Director of Department of Community Development to enter into an agreement with Waterloo Arts for the Waterloo Arts Expo through the use of Ward 8 casino revenue funds. Ordinance 427-2020 by Councilmember Bashir Jones, an emergency ordinance amending the title and sections 1 and 2 of Ordinance 742-2019 as it pertains to authorizing the Director of Department of Economic Development to enter into an agreement with Lexington Bell Community Center for the acquisition and renovation of the Superior Beverage Building through the use of Ward casino revenue funds and neighborhood capital funds. Ordinance 428-2020 by Council Members Bashir Jones and Polensek, an emergency ordinance authorizing Director of Department of Community Development to enter into an agreement with the Greater Cleveland Food Bank for the Senior and Needy Families Food Distribution Program through the use of Wards 7 and 8 casino revenue funds.
Read the motion to suspend the rules.
By Councilmember Bishop, that the rules be suspended and the legislation just read be placed on final passage, seconded by Councilmember Mooney.
Please call the roll.
Kelly, Bishop, Brancatelli, Cleveland, Conwell, Griffin, Hairston, Johnson, Bashir Jones, Joe Jones, Casey, McCormack, Mooney, Valencia, Santana, Slight, Zone. 16 yeas.
Please call the roll on passage.
Kelly, Bishop, Brancatelli, Cleveland, Conwell, Griffin, Hairston, Johnson, Bashir Jones, Joe Jones, Casey, McCormack, Mooney, Valencia, Santana, Slight, Zone. 16 yeas, Mr. President.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. First reading emergency resolutions to be adopted.
Resolution 422, 2020 by Councilmember Kelly, an emergency resolution fixing the date of the next regular meeting of council. Resolution 423, 2020 by Councilmember Joe Jones, an emergency resolution objecting to a new C1 liquor permit at 16605 South Miles Road. Resolution 424, 2020 by Councilmember Griffin, an emergency resolution objecting to a new C1 liquor permit at 3470 East 93rd Street. Resolution 425, 2020 by Councilmember Conwell, an emergency resolution objecting to a new C1 liquor permit at 1250 East 105th Street. Resolution 426, 2020 by Councilmember Brancatelli, an emergency resolution withdrawing objection to the transfer of location of a C2 and D6 liquor permit at 1503 Spring Road and repealing resolution 1187-19, objecting to said transfer. Resolution 429, 2020 by Councilmember Zone, an emergency resolution urging the United States Congress to allocate fair and direct emergency support to all of America's cities and communities to reopen and rebuild local American economies. Resolution 430, 2020 by Councilmember Hairston, an emergency resolution withdrawing objection to the transfer of ownership of a C1 and C2 liquor permit at 18506 St. Clair and repealing resolution 1027, 2019, objecting to said permit. Resolution 431, 2020 by Councilmember Hairston, an emergency resolution withdrawing objection to a new D5 liquor permit at 17406 St. Clair Avenue and repealing resolution 127, 2020, objecting to said permit. Resolution 432, 2020 by Councilmember Cleveland, an emergency resolution withdrawing objection to the transfer of ownership of C2 and C2X liquor permit at 4621 Central Avenue and repealing resolution 36, 2020, objecting to said permit. Resolution 433, 2020 by Councilmember Cleveland, an emergency resolution withdrawing objection to the transfer of location of a C1 and C2 liquor permit at 2559 East 55th Street and repealing resolution 38, 2020, objecting to said transfer. Resolution 434, 2020 by Councilmember Joe Jones, an emergency resolution withdrawing objection to the Trex transfer of a D1, D2, D3, D3A, and D6 liquor permit to 14201 Harvard Avenue and repealing resolution 385, 2020, objecting to said permit. Resolution 435, 2020 by Councilmember Bishop, an emergency resolution withdrawing objection to the renewal of a C1, C2, and D6 liquor permit at 14510 Kinsman Road and repealing resolution 1024, 2019, objecting to said permit. Resolution 436, 2020 by Councilmember Bishop, an emergency resolution withdrawing objection to the renewal of a C2, C2X liquor permit at 9305 Miles Avenue and repealing resolution 1022, 2019, objecting to said permit. Resolution 437, 2020 by Councilmember Bishop, an emergency resolution withdrawing objection to the renewal of a D2, D2X, D3, and D3A liquor permit at 4005-07 East 131st Street and patio and repealing resolution 898, 2019, objecting to said permit. Resolution 438, 2020 by Councilmember Hairston, an emergency resolution withdrawing objection to the renewal of a C1, C2, and D6 liquor permit at 12425-29 Arlington Avenue and repealing resolution 1034, 2019, objecting to said permit. Resolution 439, 2020 by Councilmember Hairston, an emergency resolution withdrawing objection to the renewal of a C1 liquor permit at 831 East 140th Street and repealing resolution 10/30/2019, objecting to said permit. Resolution 440/2020 by Councilmember Hairston, an emergency resolution withdrawing objection to the transfer of ownership of the C1, C2 liquor permit at 12200 St. Clair Avenue and repealing Resolution 1156/2019, objecting to said permit. Resolution 441/2020 by Councilmember Hairston, an emergency resolution withdrawing objection to the renewal of a D1, D2 liquor permit at 12307 St. Clair Avenue and repealing Resolution 1038/2019, objecting to said permit.
Read the motion to suspend the rules.
By Councilmember Bishop, that the rules be suspended and the legislation just read be placed on final passage, seconded by Councilmember Mooney.
Please call the roll.
Kelly, Bishop, Brancatelli, Cleveland, Conwell, Griffin, Hairston, Johnson, Bashir Jones, Joe Jones, Casey, McCormack, Mooney, Valencic, Santana, Slight Zone. 16 yeas.
Thank you. Please call the roll on passage.
Kelly, Bishop, Brancatelli, Cleveland, Conwell, Griffin, Hairston, Johnson, Bashir Jones, Joe Jones, Casey, McCormack, Mooney, Valencic, Santana, Slight Zone. 16 yeas.
Thank you. Second reading emergency ordinances to be passed.
Ordinance 322/2020 by Councilmember Slight, an emergency ordinance authorizing the Director of City Planning to enter into agreement with the Board of Park Commissioners and of the Cleveland Metropolitan Park District for the Old Lorraine Road, West Park, and Cleveland Metro Parks Planning Study through the use of Ward 17 casino revenue funds.
Read the motion to suspend the rules.
Councilmember Bishop, that the rules be suspended and the legislation just read be placed on final passage, seconded by Councilmember Mooney.
Please call the roll.
Kelly, Bishop, Brancatelli, Cleveland, Conwell, Griffin, Hairston, Johnson, Bashir Jones, Joe Jones, Casey, McCormack, Mooney, Valencic, Santana, Slight Zone. 17 yeas.
Please call the roll on passage.
Kelly, Bishop, Brancatelli, Cleveland, Conwell, Griffin, Hairston, Johnson, Bashir Jones, Joe Jones, Casey, McCormack, Mooney, Valencic, Santana, Slight Zone. 17 yeas.
Thank you. That concludes our legislation for today. I would encourage everybody to make sure that if you've got something that you need for the ward or something pending, make sure that it's on the calendar. I want to thank everybody that did that, so we were prepared for this meeting. And I know everybody needs to plan out their summer. So we will have a meeting next Wednesday, and by then we'll have a calendar after I get a chance to talk to everybody that will allow you to plan for the rest of the summer. With that, Madam Clerk, please excuse the absences.
There are none.
Thank you. And council is now adjourned to the call of the chair. But again, we are scheduled for next Wednesday at 10 o'clock, and it'll be committee of the whole plus council meeting. Thank you all very much, and we will be in touch.